Congratulations on writing your first draft. It's the most difficult part of this whole process. You probably experienced procrastination and writer's block and typing and deleting and starting and stopping. But like any good deadline-driven student, you got it done. You've produced something we can work with. The next step in the writing process is revision, giving all your thoughts and words a second look so that you can cycle through again in the writing process with more thinking and writing, getting closer to that excellent application essay. Your final essay is still several drafts away, but you've taken a great first step. Revision will now take place at many levels in your essay, from word choice and punctuation at the sentence level, to larger narrative components we reviewed in Unit 2, purpose, substance, voice, structure. You also want to give a second look to your methods. Did you avoid cliches? Follow advice about show, don't tell? You should have a good sense for how these components might work in your essay, even if you have not yet achieved your vision in your first draft. In this unit, we'll look at strategies for improving your essay. A good way to get the writing process going again is to waken your essay a bit with a little yoga and a makeover. Try stretching it out to expose some holes and fill them in with more detail. Try turning your essay on its head. How does your last paragraph look if you put it first? Think about how necessary your introduction actually is. Might your essay be more exciting if you start halfway down the page? When I give feedback to my students, that's one of my first moves. A big X at the top of the page and an arrow drawn somewhere in the middle that says, start here. Will I do that to your essay? Where does your story really start? Think about non-linear patterns for weaving your narrative together. Where to start your essay is a big question that is often not clear in the first draft. So here, at the end of our course, we're going to focus on the beginning of your essays. Your beginning deserves special attention because it serves as your first impression. It's what will hook your audience into your essay, or not. Personal narratives don't usually have formal introductions like academic essays do. In an academic essay, the introduction goes from general to specific and leads the reader to a thesis statement at the end of the introduction that will reveal the point of the essay or the main idea. It's purposefully predictable, but that's not what we're trying to achieve in the personal narrative because it will move you further away from your voice and your craft. Instead of an intro, we're going to use a lead. There's no formula for writing a good lead, but we'll look at several types and examples. As with every aspect of the essay, there are also cliché traps. This is where we'll start. As I've mentioned before, the best way to lose the positive attention from the admissions audience is to become a cliché. And the quickest way to become a cliché is to have a cliché lead to your essay. So in order to avoid that, we'll start by looking at cliché traps and writing leads. First, famous quotes or proverbs. Although some advice you might read about writing hooks might suggest that a quote makes a good hook, this is rarely true in a personal narrative. Throwing someone else's words at the top of a text about you for an audience solely interested in you is not effective. And a famous quote, by definition, is a cliché. It replaces an original thought with a famous, overused representation. A lot of international students who aren't as familiar with famous quotes in English often don't realize how unoriginal they are. It's even more cliché when the quote used by an applicant comes from somebody who is somehow associated with the school they're applying to. Some applicants to Penn think a quote by Ben Franklin, a founder of Penn and the United States, makes a good hook. But reading, "A penny saved is a penny earned" at the top of an essay will suck all the originality out of your application. Another unoriginal lead is to start with a time expression. A time expression indicates when something is taking place. Last summer break, during my freshman year, when I was 3 years old. Although you need to give your reader some context to understand when your story is taking place, you can usually sneak that further down in your opening. Or show the reader when your story is taking place by choosing your details carefully. Let's look at an example. Here's a first draft lead. When I was 7 years old, I thought I could conquer anything. One day when I was in my backyard, I decided to try to get my Frisbee out of a tree. This is how an admissions officer might read that line. When I was 7 years old, blah, blah, blah. One day, blah, blah, blah. With what you know about show, don't tell, how might you make this lead more interesting? Wouldn't this lead benefit from showing the reader you getting your Frisbee out of a tree rather than telling? Picture your 7-year-old self climbing a tree. What do you see? Picture your right sneaker wedged between the branch and the trunk of the cherry tree in your backyard. Imagine that scene and narrate it for your audience. I wedged my right sneaker into the gap between the branch and the tree trunk of the cherry tree in my backyard. I stared down my yellow Frisbee resting atop a tree branch. Nothing was going to stop me, not the 8 feet between that branch and I, and not the scratch on my right leg from the last time I slid out of the tree. When I was 7 years old, I thought I could conquer anything. Sliding the first sentence down a few lines, after you've hooked your reader with action, serves as a nice concluding thought to a vivid example you've just shown the reader. The sentence by itself tells and doesn't show, but it's effective when it follows a detailed example of what it's telling. This is not meant to be an example of what to do in your lead, but hopefully you can see how you might rethink your own lead to show and not tell, and to start with action. Our next topic, action leads. An action lead puts the reader right in the middle of the action of a story. Then it zooms out to give the reader some context. An action lead is just good storytelling. Here are some examples. Struck with panic, I flipped through the many papers in my travel folder until I found my ticket. The goldfish lay lifeless in the middle of the kitchen floor, and nobody could understand how he got there. Like a shotgun through a flock of pigeons. Katie, warm up! Beads of sweat collected on Coach Stirk's forehead, and he yelled down the bench again. Katie, warm up! In this last example, the action is in the dialogue. Katie, warm up! Dialogue is another effective lead for an introduction. It could be a conversation or a thought in your own head. You shouldn't rely too much on direct dialogue, but a brief hook into your essay with speech is usually effective. Here are some examples. See if you want to read the next line. I'm not going back home again. Come in, but don't touch anything. And as we said before, Katie, warm up. Dialogue and action leads are effective because they plant a seed of curiosity and intrigue in the reader. Humans are naturally curious creatures, and this type of lead plays into that. The only way to know what's going on is to keep on reading. Other creative leads can also achieve this. A creative lead can be funny, ironic, or a surprising statement. We had a 1996 Yukon rusting in our garage. It's weird being a high school bridge player in Lincoln, Nebraska. Every Sunday morning, the local Starbucks plays host to what my mom likes to call mother-son bonding time. You can make almost anything out of Legos. Read your lead again and see how intrigued you are. Read it to your friends or family and see what they think. In this first round of revisions, see if you can create a great hook for your essay.